My father remarried 3 months after my mom died of cancer. They erased all her photos. Now they want to meet my son. But I got a restraining order, and they never expected what I did with the baby's name. I'm 25 years old. I work in logistics for a distribution company, and my fiancée, Lauren, is 8 months pregnant with our first child. But instead of being excited preparing the baby's room and buying diapers like I should be, I'm dealing with a restraining order against my father and his wife because basically they don't understand what the word no means. And they've decided they have the right to be in my child's life, even though I've made it very clear for years that I don't want them anywhere near us. The thing is, this didn't start recently. I mean, it's not like I suddenly became an ungrateful son who hates his parents for no reason. This goes back over 10 years. Since my mom died when I was 14, and my father decided that 3 months later was enough grieving time to start dating someone new. My mom died of cancer. It was horrible, like one of those things you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. She fought for almost 2 years, and I watched her deteriorate little by little, losing weight, losing hair, losing strength, until one day she just couldn't anymore. I was 14 when it happened. I was in 9th grade, and I remember the day she died. I was at school and they pulled me out of math class to tell me I needed to get to the hospital immediately. By the time I got there, it was too late. She was already gone, and my father was sitting there in a chair next to her bed, holding her hand and crying, and I thought, well, at least we're in this together. At least we have each other to get through it. How wrong I was, honestly. The first few months after she died were a blur, you know, the kind where you just exist and breathe but don't really live. I went to school, came home, did homework, ate something my father ordered because neither of us could cook well. And then I'd lock myself in my room looking at pictures of my mom on my phone until I fell asleep, crying. My father was equally devastated, I guess, or so it seemed at first. But around the 2-month mark, I noticed he started going out more, staying out late. And when I'd ask where he'd been, he'd just say vague things like, with friends from work, or needed to clear my head a bit. I didn't think much of it at the time because I was too wrapped up in my own grief to worry about what he was doing with his free time. Turns out those outings weren't with friends from work. Turns out my father had met someone, a woman named Brenda, who worked in the HR department of his company. And at the 3-month mark after my mom died, literally 90 days later, he sat me down in the living room and said, "Connor, there's someone I want you to meet. I've been seeing someone and I think it's time I bring her home." I just sat there staring at him like he'd grown a second head. Like, seriously? 3 months? You couldn't even wait until the first year was up? But he just kept talking, saying that life goes on, that Mom would have wanted us to be happy, that Brenda was a good person, and that I'd like her. I didn't say anything. Honestly, didn't know what to say. I just nodded and went to my room because I felt like if I opened my mouth, I was going to say something I'd regret. Brenda showed up the following week, a woman who was like 38 years old. My father was 42 at the time, with dyed blonde hair and a smile that seemed too big for her face. She arrived with a tray of homemade brownies, because apparently that's how you win the heart of a grieving teenager, and she sat on the living room couch, the same couch where my mom used to sit and watch her soap operas, and started asking me questions about school and my hobbies like she really cared. I answered with monosyllables, like, fine, nothing special, not much, because I didn't feel like pretending I liked her or that I cared about her existence. My father kept giving me those behave yourself looks, but I basically ignored him. You know what I mean? I didn't owe her or him anything at that point. What really screwed me over, sorry for the language, but it's the only word that describes how I felt, was when 4 months after that first visit, 4 months, my father announced that Brenda was moving in with us. He didn't even ask if I was okay with it, didn't even pretend my opinion mattered, just said, "Brenda's moving in next weekend. She's going to use the guest room for her clothes and stuff. I hope you'll make her feel welcome." I was 15 by then. My birthday had been 2 weeks earlier. My father forgot until the last minute and bought me an Amazon gift card in a rush. And suddenly this stranger was moving her stuff into my house, into the house where my mom had lived, where her things were still in her closet, where her perfume could still be smelled in some rooms. And then came my 15th birthday. Well, technically it had already passed, but my father decided to have a late celebration because he felt guilty, I guess. And he invited some family and friends. They made a cake, put up decorations, and just... When we were all gathered in the dining room, my father stood up with a glass of wine in his hand. He almost never drank, so that was already weird, and said, "We have an announcement to make. Brenda and I are getting married." He just stood there waiting for applause or congratulations. And people started reacting, some surprised, others uncomfortable because they knew it had barely been like 9 months since my mom died. But before anyone could say anything, I got up from my chair, walked over to the table where the birthday cake was, grabbed it with both hands, and threw it on the floor. The cake crashed, making a horrible noise. The plate broke, and everyone went absolutely silent, staring at me. I just said, "This is bullshit," and walked out of the house. I disappeared for 3 days, stayed at my best friend Jake's house without telling my father where I was, turned off my phone, and basically just existed in a bubble where I didn't have to think about any of it. Jake and his parents were amazing. They let me stay without asking questions, gave me space, and when I finally went back home, my father was furious but also worried, I guess. He told me I couldn't disappear like that he'd been scared, that he thought something had happened to me. But I just looked at him and said, "I don't give a damn what you think. You're going to marry her. Do it, but don't expect me to be happy about it." And I went to my room and locked the door. Things got worse after that, much worse. My father and Brenda got married like 3 months later, in a small ceremony I didn't even go to. I told them I had an exam that day, Lee, and stayed home playing video games all day. And when they came back from their weekend honeymoon, which was at some cheap beach resort because neither of them had much money, they started making changes to the house. First, it was small things. Brenda reorganized the kitchen, changed the living room curtains, bought new pillows for the couch, and I let it slide. Because technically, she lived there now, and I guess she had the right to make minor changes, but then they started with my mom's things. One day I came home from school and noticed the pictures of my mom that were in the living room were gone. I asked where they were, and my father said, "We put them in the attic." We thought it was time to move forward. I ran up to the attic and found a box with all my mom's pictures, her things, her favorite books, her blanket from the living room, everything shoved in a cardboard box like it was trash they wanted to hide. I lost it, literally started screaming and crying, went down the stairs with the box and said to my father, "How can you do this to her? How can you erase her like this as if she never existed?" He just said, "Connor, we have to move forward. Your mother's not here anymore, and Brenda feels uncomfortable with all those pictures everywhere." And I said, "And why should I care how Brenda feels? This was my mom's house. She lived here. She died less than a year ago. And we're going to erase her because your new wife feels uncomfortable?" I took all the pictures to my room, put up as many as I could on the walls, on my desk, on my nightstand, basically turned my bedroom into a shrine to my mom, and my father and Brenda stopped coming in after that. But it didn't end there. It never ends with people like them, you know? Brenda started making comments about how I should start calling her mom, like casually suggesting it in conversations, saying things like, "When you tell your mom you need help with homework," or "Your mom can take you to the doctor tomorrow," referring to herself. The first few times I ignored her, but after like the 5th or 6th time, I exploded and told her, "You're not my mom. You're never going to be my mom. My mom is dead, and you're just the woman my father married too quickly because he couldn't stand being alone." My father grounded me for that, took my phone away for 2 weeks, but it was worth it, because at least it made my position clear. Brenda cried, locked herself in her room, and my father told me I was ungrateful, that Brenda just wanted to have a good relationship with me, that I was being cruel for no reason. But the truth is, I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. I was protecting my mom's memory. And if that made me the bad guy in the story, then so be it. I didn't care. The next 3 years were basically a cold war in that house. I did the bare minimum, went to school, came back, did homework, ate dinner in my room, and avoided interacting with them as much as possible. My father tried to reach out a few times, but I was already too resentful, too angry, and every time I saw him, I could only think about how he'd let Brenda erase my mom from that house, from our lives, and I couldn't forgive him for that. When I turned 18, I left for college, got scholarships and student loans so I wouldn't have to depend on him financially, and basically cut contact. I'd send them occasional text messages so they'd know I was alive, like, all good, busy with classes, but that was it. No calls, no visits, nothing. I met Lauren in my second year of college. We were in the same statistics class, and she sat next to me on the first day because it was the only available seat. She is amazing, super smart, funny, kind, and when I told her about my mom and all the drama with my father and Brenda, she didn't judge me, just listened and said, "That sounds horrible. I'm so sorry." We started dating like 3 months after we met, and honestly, she was the first person in years who made me feel like maybe things could be okay, like maybe I could be happy again despite everything that had happened. We got engaged when I was 23. She was 22, and it was perfect, small, intimate, just the two of us in a park where we used to go study. I called my father to tell him because I felt like he should at least know, and he sounded excited. Said, "Congratulations, son. I'd like to meet her someday," and I just said, "We'll see," and hung up. I had no intention of letting him or Brenda be at my wedding. They weren't going to be anywhere near that day. But apparently Brenda had other plans. Like 2 weeks after we announced our engagement on Facebook, because that's what people do now, Brenda made a post on her profile. It said something like, "So excited that my son Connor is getting married. I can't wait to be a grandma soon. I'm so proud of him and the family he's building." When I saw that post, I literally felt my blood boil, like how dare she? How dare she call herself my mother publicly, when she knows perfectly well I've never accepted her in that role. So I did something that maybe wasn't the most mature, but definitely felt good at the moment. I commented on her post publicly. I wrote something like, "Brenda, you're not my mother. You've never been my mother, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop pretending you are. My mother died 9 years ago, and you're never going to replace her. Please stop using my life to feed your fantasy of being a mother when I clearly don't want you in that role." The post basically exploded. Her friends started commenting saying I was cruel, that she was just excited. Some family members who were still in contact with them defended me, saying I had the right to set boundaries. It was a total mess. Brenda deleted the post like an hour later. My father called me screaming, saying I'd humiliated Brenda publicly and that I was a horrible son, and I simply told him, "If you do something like this, again I'm blocking you from everything and you'll never know anything about my life again." And I hung up. And I kept my word. I blocked them on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere, and stopped responding to their text messages and calls. 3 years went by like that. 3 years of total silence, and honestly, they were the best 3 years of my adult life up to that point. Lauren and I got married in a small ceremony, with just our close friends and her family. Her parents are amazing, by the way. They accepted me like another son from the start. I got a good job in logistics. We moved into a small but nice house in a quiet neighborhood, and everything finally seemed to be falling into place. And then Lauren got pregnant. It was planned. We'd been trying for a while, and when we saw the 2 lines on the pregnancy test, we both cried with happiness. We announced the pregnancy to our close friends and Lauren's family, but obviously we didn't tell my father or Brenda anything because they were still blocked, and I had no intention of changing that. Lauren agreed with my decision. She knew the whole story, knew what they'd done to me. And she told me, "It's your family. You decide who's in our child's life, and I support you completely." Everything was going fine until Lauren was 8 months along, almost ready to give birth, and we were finishing setting up the baby's room when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I thought it was weird. I went to open the door, and there were my father and Brenda standing on my porch with boxes of gifts in their hands and smiles on their faces. I literally froze, like I couldn't process that they were there, at my house, after 3 years of total silence. My father spoke first, said Connor. "I know it's been years, but we heard you're going to be a dad, and we wanted to come congratulate you. We brought gifts for the baby." I just said, "How did you know where I live?" And Brenda said, "We have our ways. What's important is we're here now." I closed the door in their faces, literally, just said, "You're not welcome here, leave," and locked the door. They rang the doorbell like 5 more times, yelled things through the door like, "We just want to talk," and "We're family." But I didn't open it. I stayed inside with Lauren, who was just as surprised as I was, and eventually they left. I thought that was the end of it, that they'd gotten the message, but oh surprise, I was completely wrong. A week later, 1 week, Lauren saw a post in a Facebook group for our neighborhood. Turns out my father and Brenda had bought a house literally 5 minutes from ours. 5 minutes. The post was from Brenda introducing herself to the neighbors, saying they'd just moved to be close to their son and grandson who was about to be born. And she gave our address in the post like, "We live very close to Connor and Lauren. They're expecting their first baby. We're so excited." Lauren showed me the post and I felt like I was going to have a panic attack, you know? Like that feeling where the walls are closing in on you and you can't breathe right. I'd spent years setting boundaries with them, years making it clear I didn't want them in my life. And now they'd bought a house practically next to mine without my permission or knowledge. The next thing that happened was Brenda started posting pictures of me as a kid on Facebook. Pictures, I guess she had from when they lived in the family house, and she'd write things like, "My son Connor when he was 10 years old. So proud to see him becoming a father." She used words like, "my son," "my baby," "our grandson," as if she had any right to me or my child who wasn't even born yet. Her friends would comment things like, "What a beautiful son you have," and "You can tell you're a great mother." And I wanted to throw up every time someone told me about it because I'd blocked Brenda, but people kept sending me screenshots of her posts. I blocked them on Facebook again because apparently they'd created new profiles, changed all our privacy settings on social media, and sent them a very clear text message saying, "If you approach my house again or keep posting about me or my family without my permission, I'm going to take legal action." I thought that would be enough. I thought they'd finally understand I was serious. But no, of course not. 2 weeks later, they showed up at my house again. This time with even more gifts, a crib, baby clothes, toys, and they parked in my driveway like they had the right to be there. I was inside with Lauren and we heard the noise. I looked out the window and saw them unloading things from their truck, and at that moment I took my phone and called the police. I told them, "There are 2 people on my property who aren't invited. I've asked them multiple times to leave, and they don't respect my boundaries. I need someone to come." The police arrived like 15 minutes later, talked to them, and my father tried to explain that they just wanted to leave gifts for their grandson, that they weren't doing anything wrong. But the officer explained to them that if I didn't want them on my property, they had to leave, or they could be arrested for trespassing. They left that day but left all the gifts in my driveway, and I had to load all that stuff and take it to a thrift store because I didn't want anything that came from them in my house. Lauren was stressed. The baby was due any day, and the last thing we needed was this drama, but they couldn't or wouldn't understand it. Like, a week later, we received a certified letter from a lawyer, and when I opened it, I almost fell over. It was a request for family mediation. Basically, my father and Brenda had hired a lawyer who said they had the right to establish a relationship with their grandchild and that they wanted us to go to mediation to resolve our differences in a controlled environment. I showed Lauren the letter and she said, "Can they do that? Can they legally force you to have contact with them?" I didn't know the answer, so I contacted a lawyer, explained the whole situation, and he told me that in our state, grandparents technically could request visitation rights under certain circumstances, but that it would be very difficult for them to get it, given that they'd never had a relationship with me in years, and that I had valid reasons for maintaining distance. He advised me not to respond to the mediation request, that it wasn't mandatory, and that if they decided to take this to court, then we could defend ourselves appropriately. I didn't respond to the letter, basically ignored it completely, and thought maybe that would be the end of it. But no, because a week later, when Lauren was literally days away from giving birth, they showed up again. This time they came on a Sunday morning, rang the doorbell, and when I opened the door, they were there with more gifts, tears in Brenda's eyes, and my father saying, "Connor, please. We just want to be part of the baby's life. We're family." I had my phone in my hand, recording everything. I'd learned from the lawyer that it was a good idea to have evidence of everything, and I told them clearly in front of the camera, "I've told you multiple times you're not welcome here. I've asked you to respect my boundaries. You've shown up uninvited 3 times now. You bought a house nearby without my knowledge, and you're harassing me and my pregnant wife. If you don't leave right now, I'm going to call the police again, and I'm going to file for a restraining order. My father turned red, started yelling that I was an ungrateful son, that after everything they'd done for me, this is how I repaid them, that Brenda had tried to be a good mother to me, and I treated her like garbage. I just kept recording and said, "Everything you're saying is being recorded. This is harassment. This is invasion of privacy. Leave now." Brenda started crying harder, like dramatically sobbing, saying she just wanted to love her grandson, that she'd never had children of her own, and this was her only chance to be a grandmother. And I told her, and that's my fault because... What? Because you married my father knowing I didn't accept you as a mother? That was your choice. Now live with the consequences. They finally left after I threatened to call the police again, and I went inside with Lauren, who was crying from the stress. She told me, "I can't take this anymore. I'm about to have a baby and I can't be this stressed. You have to do something." And she was right. I had to do something definitive, something that would legally force them to stay away. So that same week, with the video I'd recorded and all the evidence of their messages, social media posts, and uninvited appearances, my lawyer helped me file for a temporary restraining order against both of them. The order was approved like 2 weeks later, just a few days before Lauren gave birth, and basically it said that my father and Brenda couldn't come within 500 feet of us, couldn't contact us in any way, and couldn't post anything about us on social media. If they violated the order, they could be arrested. When they received the legal notice, my father sent me like 20 text messages from a new number I didn't have blocked, saying it was ridiculous, that I was exaggerating, that I was depriving my child of his grandparents because of past grudges. I forwarded all those messages to my lawyer as additional evidence of harassment and blocked him from that number too. Lauren gave birth 3 weeks ago. We have a beautiful, healthy, perfect boy, and we named him Matthew. Same as my mom, but the masculine version because her name was Matilda, and she always wanted to have another child to give that name to. It's my way of keeping her present, of my son having something of her even though he never met her. Lauren was completely on board. In fact, it was her idea. And when he was born, and I held him for the first time, I cried, thinking about how my mom would have loved to meet him, how she would have been the best grandmother in the world, and how she never would have tried to force anything or erase memories or manipulate situations like Brenda has tried to do. My father and Brenda don't know the baby's already been born, don't know his name, haven't seen pictures, don't know anything, and that's how it's going to stay. The temporary restraining order became permanent a week ago, after a hearing where I presented all the evidence, and the judge agreed that their behavior constituted harassment and that there were valid reasons to keep them away. My father and Brenda apparently have 6 months before they can request the order be reviewed, but my lawyer says it's unlikely a judge will lift it given the documented pattern of behavior. Lauren and I are doing fine now, focused on our son, on our little family, and for the first time in years, I feel like I can really breathe without having to worry about when they're going to show up again or what they're going to try to do. It still hurts that my father chose Brenda over me, that he chose to erase my mom instead of honoring her memory, that he couldn't understand why his actions hurt me so much. But I've accepted that some people are never going to understand, never going to admit they were wrong, and that it's okay to cut those relationships, even if they're family by blood. My son is going to grow up knowing the story of his grandmother Matilda. He's going to see pictures of her. He's going to know she existed and was loved, and he's never going to have to deal with people who don't respect boundaries or who try to force relationships that aren't genuine. And honestly, that's all that matters now.